In this video, we're going to look at the top 5 most common questions that are asked in Holiday Inn interviews, and I'm going to help you plan fantastic answers that will get you a job working at the Holiday Inn. So let's start with a question that is asked in virtually every single Holiday Inn interview, and that is, what times can you work? So what shifts can you do? And they are extremely interested in knowing this answer, and if you've not planned and prepared well for this answer, it can absolutely tank your chances of getting the job. So you need to follow the system that I'm going to teach you that scores highly on this question. So the first thing you have to demonstrate is that you are flexible. Hotel staffing demands change throughout the day, and hotels are a very dynamic place, and they're always looking to maintain their customer service standards. And so they need to employ people who are flexible and are going to be there when they need people. You're going to have to show a can-do attitude, again, to keep those service standards high and maintain the hotel's levels of staffing. So they need people who can say yes to as much as possible. The more you can say yes in this question, the higher you're likely to be scored. The other thing you have to absolutely make sure you do is demonstrate commitment to Holiday Inn. The worst way to answer this is to immediately talk about all the times that you can't do and then say something like, but I can do any other time. That is not a very positive way to set up the interview. You want to show off loads of flexibility, and you don't want them to call into question your commitment. If you are listing loads of times that you can't do, that really puts them off in a big way. On the flip side, there are certain times that if you mention, hotels get really interested in. So particularly, Holiday Inn likes people who are happy to work night shifts because some employees would rather not work those times. So if you're happy to do that, that is solving a little bit of a problem for them. Early in the morning is a key time for hotels that's slightly more difficult to staff. Check-in times are slightly busier, so the staffing demands there are slightly higher. If you're happy to work on Christmas and New Year, that's a definite thing that you should be bringing up in the interview. If you're not really happy working those times, it's best just not to mention it. It's unlikely to come up, but if you can, definitely volunteer that. There is a slightly strange thing about the way that hotels work, in the sense that they are very busy during the holidays when everyone else is on holiday. So it's like running at a different pace to the rest of the world. When everyone else is on holiday, the hotels are busy. So if you're volunteering to work in the holidays, that is their key time. And also, evenings are where hotels are slightly busier because people have finished what they're doing during the day and they come back to the hotel in the evening. So if you start listing these times, I guarantee you that the manager will start to get more interested in you as a candidate because you're just listing off his wish list or her wish list. And that definitely gets them very interested. So let's look at question 2, which is a question you absolutely must prepare for, which is, what do you know about Holiday Inn? You should never go to any interview ever without having done thorough research and knowing the key facts about your employer. So I've prepared for you some of the key things that you need to know in order to go into your interview and show that you've done your research and show that you've done some reading about the company, because it is much better to employ someone who has done their work and is well prepared than someone who isn't. This is a great way to test whether someone is bothered to prepare. So you should know that Holiday Inn is part of the Intercontinental Hotels Group that's listed in London. It's a British company. You should know the difference between the two main Holiday Inn brands, which is the Holiday Inn and then the Holiday Inn Express. The Holiday Inn Express is a more no-frills type offering down the lower end of the budget spectrum, with very simplistic hotels that have the same sort of cleanliness standards and room standards that you would expect in other hotels, but with a slightly reduced service offering that gives a very competitive price for what's offered. The key to the success of companies like Holiday Inn is consistency. And you want to talk about this in your interview, that guests that come to Holiday Inn expect to see the same thing. They book with Holiday Inn because they know that the rooms are going to be clean. They know they're going to be of a certain standard. They know exactly what they're getting, and they expect that if they stay in various hotels with Holiday Inn throughout the country and throughout the world, they're going to get a basically similar experience. And so brands like Holiday Inn are giving a brand promise of consistency, and you can talk about that. You can talk a little bit about their positioning in the market. They're generally towards the upper end of economy. They're not cheap, low quality budget hotels, but they're not a luxury brand either. They're within the upper economy bracket, with the Holiday Inn being towards the top end of the upper economy and the Holiday Inn Express being just within the upper economy bracket. You can also talk a bit about their history. They're actually named after a musical film with Fred Astaire, and that was the idea of the original architect who made it as a joke, but it was actually adopted as the name. It was founded in 1952 and originally specialized on motels, but now the motels business is really wound down significantly. So it's not really in the motels business anymore. You should know that a lot of their Holiday Inns are franchised, that the parent company doesn't own them in the vast majority of cases. So you may not actually be employed directly by IHG unless there's a management contract in place there. So you could be working for the management company or you could be working for the hotel directly, and you want to find out exactly what case that is. You want to show off some knowledge about the rewards club, so you're showing that you already know some of the stuff you'll be taught in training. So look up IHG rewards, and that goes across all of the IHG brands. So be familiar with how the points work and what the points turn into, and that shows some great reading and research. Success in this question is really based on the diagram on the right. You want to know everything that everyone knows, so the obvious things, and then show a couple of bits of niche reading like the origin of the name and their founding and a bit of their history, because that's really a way of showing off. And even if you're not asked this question directly, definitely drop some of these things in, particularly the consistency ideas can be dropped in at any point in the interview, and that really does impress them that you've done your research. The next point that I want to make clear is that reading the annual report of the company will give you fabulous information, and just mentioning that you've read that is quite an impressive thing to show. So moving on to question 3. So how would you deal with a rude and abusive guest? And this is something that unfortunately comes up a lot in the hospitality industry, and they want to be reassured that you're going to deal with it appropriately. And this is really a negative screening question. They want to screen out people that give a bad answer to this rather than just hire the people that give a good answer. So the key to success here is to talk about being professional and calm. You are a representative of the Holiday Inn brand. When you're standing there at work, you represent that brand, and you don't want to represent that brand in a negative way. And make clear in your interview that you view yourself as a brand representative. So that's why one of the reasons you're going to be professional and calm. Mention the policy that you're going to stick to Holiday Inn policies, that you don't set the policies, and it is your job to correctly and consistently apply those policies fairly. And then the other key phrase to use, and simply using this phrase reassures them significantly, and that is that you're going to use de-escalation techniques. So if you mention the company's policies, you mention being professional and calm, you're never going to argue back, you're never going to shout, you're never going to raise your voice, and that you're going to make appropriate use of de-escalation techniques to calm everyone down. And really, fundamentally, your job is to maximize the customer experience. Ultimately, you want to ensure, one, that rude and abusive guest calms down and becomes a satisfied guest and has their problem resolved. Often rude and abusive guests can be dealt with by simply listening. They're rude and abusive because they really want someone to listen to their complaint, and just being active and saying, I'm listening to your complaint, let's have a chat about it, let's sort it out, can go a long way to de-escalate it. And also you have to think about maintaining the experience to all the other guests who don't want to see this. This is not part of their holiday plan, going to see people shouting and screaming. So you're going to get in that idea about maximizing customer experience to make sure everyone has a great experience at Holiday Inn. So let's move on and look at the next question. So strengths and weaknesses is something that they are likely to ask about. And when you're asked about a strength, the first thing you have to do is make sure it's a significant strength. So it doesn't have to be something that is incredibly impressive, but it has to be something that is very useful to your everyday job and is going to make a difference to how you do it. You have to think of some way to back it up. It's not good enough to just give a strength without actually having any evidence for it. That doesn't really impress them. When it's backed up with evidence, it becomes so much more compelling. But the most important thing for a strength is it has to be extremely relevant to Holiday Inn's business. It's no good talking about being a great chess player because that's not part of your role. And the way that you should always answer this is with a simple format. A significant strength I have is, tell them what your strength is. So think about all the things that go on in a hotel and in your job, and pick one of the parts of your job that you can show as a strength. This is evidenced by, and you can give them an example of when you use that strength. A reference from a previous manager is probably one of the most powerful pieces of evidence, because that says someone else believes that I have this strength. And if you have some sort of qualification in hospitality or in food preparation, for example, simply having that qualification is proof that you actually have demonstrated a skill to a particular level. But then the most important part of this answer is to actually do a bit of work for them and explain how your strength is actually going to help their business be better. And if you do that, you're going to be scored highly for your strength. On the flip side, you're going to be asked about your weaknesses, quite likely. It's a very common interview question. And you have to make sure that it is a real weakness. They're not interested in some silly weakness like I'm a total perfectionist. That is showing that you've not really thought about it and you're not answering the question. You try to pass off something that's a little bit of a strength, but also a little bit of a weakness as a big weakness, and it's not. You also want to talk about how you're sorting it out, that this is not going to be a big weakness for a long time. Some typical weaknesses could be something about spelling if you're not in a role that involves a lot of writing, or only speaking one language where you're applying somewhere that's not entirely customer facing, or where the vast majority of applicants only speak English. Then you can talk about things that Holiday Inn don't care about. They really should not care about your weakness. So if you were to say something like, occasionally I come across as rude and aggressive, and you're applying for a front of house role, you've just lost the interview. So you definitely don't want to mention any of that. So the way you structure your answer is to say, one of the weaknesses I'm aware of is, tell them about your weakness, make sure it's not important, and then simply spend most of the interview question time talking about how you're working on it. So you could be taking a course, you could be looking for some support and mentoring on overcoming it. You really want to be doing something actively to get rid of your weakness, so that even if they dislike your weakness, they're going to be satisfied it's not going to be a problem in your job. So let's look at question 5, which is a question you have to be careful of, and I really recommend you prepare for in case it comes up. It's a very common interview question, and it can be asked and answered in a disastrous way. And so you could be asked, why did you leave your last job? And so we'll start with the negative things. They absolutely do not want to hear any negatives about your previous job. They don't want you moaning. They don't want to hear you attacking your last workplace, because that sets off major alarm bells. Never say anything negative about anyone you have ever worked with ever in an interview. It is an absolute train wreck waiting to happen if you do that. Don't criticize management, and don't mention any conflict. Even if you had the worst manager imaginable and they were totally awful and you did nothing wrong, don't bring it up. So never say anything negative in response to this question. Some things that they're quite happy to hear is family locations. So you're moving to be with a partner, you're moving for your children's school. There's something family related that is a perfectly respectable reason for wanting to move. You want to talk about the positives of Holiday Inn, why you really want to work here, so you can turn it around and talk about why this is such a great job and an opportunity and you're really interested in it. Promotion, if your last place was closed and everybody was got rid of, then that's saying that there's nothing to do with your performance, it's just the company went bankrupt, for example. And a definite thing to mention that's really reassuring is to talk about how you left your previous job in a way that you could return. So if you wanted to go back to your previous job, you are very highly confident that they would definitely have you back, and they were sad to lose you. And if you get that in, they're going to be very reassured. This is, again, a negative screening question where they screen out people that give bad answers and just tick the people that give satisfactory answers. And as a bonus, here are some great questions to ask in your interview. Definitely ask them about the next steps in the hiring process. Ask them about what they find the greatest things about working at Holiday Inn, so you can share in their passion. So when they talk about the things they love about their job, agree with them. Say how you would really enjoy that as well, so you can form a kind of bond there. Ask what you can do to prepare for your first day at Holiday Inn and make some commitments there and then to do the things that are recommended. That goes across really positively. A clever question to ask is to ask about what a great employee looks like, because when the manager gives you a list basically of all the things that they are interested in, you can remind them of previous answers and points in your career where you've demonstrated what they're looking for. And lastly, make sure you ask one question that's made up on the day to show that you're listening and show that you're interested in what they have to say. So hopefully this video has been very helpful to you. Best of luck in your Holiday Inn interview, and thank you very much for watching.